For the masses, this will be known as the Super Bowl 54 edition, but for my fellow draft nerds out here, this is my Senior Bowl edition. Now, I wasn't at the Senior Bowl practices. I do want to go one day, but this year just wasn't the year for me, so I'm not going to pretend like I was there and tell you how great these guys looked in practice or whatever, but I'm basing my information off of real scouts that were there, whose opinions that I trust and typically agree with. The NFL draft order is about 98% set now, and I was waiting for the underclassmen deadline to declare so that I could make sure that I didn't have anybody else in here that was not actually going to end up even being in the draft. I have included one trade because to me this is the most glaringly obvious trade that has presented itself thus far. And then public service announcement real quick. I obviously don't know as much about your favorite team as you do, nor do I know the habits and tendencies of their acquisition of talent during the offseason. But that's where the comments come in handy, and I promise that if you provide me with some insight on how your GM likes to draft, or the type of players they like, or maybe they're big into drafting guys from the SEC. I keep a lot of draft notes next to each team in a Google spreadsheet, and your helpful input will get added for future reference. If you like NFL mock drafts and you appreciate what you see here, please hit that like button. The goal on this video is going to be 1,000 likes. It's a great way to help support me and this channel. If you'd like to take it another step further, you could subscribe, hit the bell notification, and share this with a football friend. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into this thing. At pick number 1, we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking Joe Burrow. The Bengals taking Joe Burrow is pretty much a lock. I mentioned it in a previous mock that I might toy with the idea of making Chase Young the pick here just to see how the rest of the draft would play out, but after the national championship game and that playoff run, that really just seems like a great waste of time. Midway through the season, I did have my doubts on Joe Burrow being the top option at quarterback in this draft. I felt like he really hadn't been challenged enough, and those one-year wonders at quarterback really scare me, but the adversity from Brent Venables' Clemson defense in the national championship was kind of the last box that I needed to check for Joe Burrow. I wanted to see how he responded when things weren't going well, or that it looked like LSU might actually be matched in talent on the field. After taking a big hit that looked like he might have a broken rib or two, Burrow looked like he was struggling to deal with it a bit. He was no longer Joe Cool and was kind of Joe Dick to anybody that came up to check on him. His body language was like Jay Cutler, but he stayed at it and steadily took over that game. This guy is everything that you want in a quarterback, and I actually love that he was able to adjust his demeanor so everybody knew, hey, no, this is serious. Lock in and win this game. I saw a Daniel Jones comparison, and while I get the physical comparison, this is Daniel Jones with the confidence of Drew Brees. And then one more thing on this pick here being a lock. Adam Schefter, he's a busy man this time of year, and he's also a pretty reliable source. This comment from him makes me feel like he's got a pretty reliable source within the Bengals that should eliminate any speculation from who's going with pick number 1.
Joe Burrow is going to be the number 1 pick in this upcoming draft. You don't have to speculate on any trades. Okay, I don't care what anybody says. I'm telling you, they're holding on to the pick, and they're going to take Joe Burrow at number 1.
At number 2, the Washington Redskins selecting Chase Young is also kind of a lock. Now, I loved the hire of Ron Rivera, and Jack Del Rio was a great choice to run the defense. I think Del Rio is going to move this unit to a 4-3, and that means the defensive line is going to have Montez Sweat in the edge, and an interior defensive line rotation of Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Matt Ioannidis. John Allen could even sub in for Montez Sweat or play opposite him at defensive end in some obvious running plays, but to me it seems very obvious that the possible number 1 overall player in this draft will go number 2, because adding Chase Young opposite of Montez Sweat, this defensive line would be able to go toe-to-toe with any offensive line in the league, especially the Cowboys and Eagles, which is what they're built to do already. Redskins' current edge rusher, Ryan Kerrigan, could walk in free agency, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him in a 4-3 as kind of a bridging the gap player if they can get him cheap for a couple years, but this Redskins defense has got a bright future ahead of them either way. At number 3, we've got the Detroit Lions. The Lions pick in my last mock was pretty controversial. Lions fans were hot about it. Understandable considering the last time the Lions picked 3rd overall was in 2002. They took another Oregon quarterback, Joey Harrington. He went 18-37 as a starter in his 4 seasons with Detroit, and while I get that the coaching staff needs to win in 2020 or else, but that doesn't mean you waste an opportunity in the draft to secure a decade of quarterback stability. And if the front office of the Lions is smart, they'll play up the possibilities of drafting a quarterback, which sounds like they've already done, or at least started to do, and most most notably show interest in Tua Tagovailoa. They need to pretend like they've got offers on the table so that they can trade down and collect picks. After losing Stafford, this team crumbled to a barely competitive level, so they need as much draft stock as possible so they can acquire a little bit more depth. The Dolphins are the best option to talk into a trade down because the fall wouldn't be far, and they have extra first rounders this year that, based on the trade value chart, it's probably going to cost about that much to move up just these 2 spots. So here we have my first trade, my only trade of this draft, and I'm sure that this will still get criticized, but I think the Lions fans have just been losing for so long that they don't even know what's best for them anymore. So for this mock, I'm doing one trade scenario since it's so early. The Dolphins trade number 5 and number 18 to the Detroit Lions in exchange for the 3rd overall pick, which they used to select Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. I've been hesitant to give the Dolphins Tua with this early pick, with them just staying at number 5, in fact, because at the time, Tua hadn't even declared officially for the draft yet, but now that he's officially declared, it feels like he must have gotten word from the NFL Draft Advisory Board that he's still expected to go high in the draft. Otherwise, it'd be hard not to go back to Alabama with the guys that they've got coming back. If the Dolphins want him that bad, they might actually have to go and get him. Luckily for them, they've got plenty of ammunition acquired in their 2019 fire sale, but the Lions and Giants will both be auctioning off picks for other teams to come up and get him if he's still on the board. It's not quite as much of a hustle as the 49ers pulled on the Bears with that Mitch Trubisky trade. While having to give up number 18 might seem steep, if it locks you up at number 3 to get the quarterback that you want, it'll be totally worth it in the end. And there's a chance that the Lions would settle for pick number 26 instead of 18. But honestly, if another team is offering a future first rounder to get up in front of the Dolphins, the Lions would probably take that trade because the odds of it being higher than 26 or 18 is definitely in their favor. And what do the Dolphins need all these first round picks for? Of the last 8 first round picks that they've had, only 3 are still on the roster. So go for quality over quantity here. At pick number 4, the New York Giants are on the clock, and they've got to be hoping that Tua falls into their lap, because that Daniel Jones guy sucks. Just kidding. You guys know I'm not that kind of irresponsible mock drafter. No, the Giants would hope for Tua to fall to them because, like I mentioned, the Dolphins are at 5, and such an obvious floor for him to fall, and the price could be auctioned to the highest Chargers or Panthers. I mean, bitter. The Giants could afford to trade down at least a few spots and still get one of the top offensive tackles available. I have the Giants selecting Andrew Thomas out of Georgia here at number 4, and he might not be available if they actually did trade down. The biggest issue with the Giants trading down with such a needed offensive tackle is that we saw what happened the last time the Giants reached on an offensive tackle with Eric Flowers. So I've got them staying put here, but maybe in my next mock, I'll play that scenario out and just see what happens. At pick number 5, we now have the Detroit Lions on the clock after trading down with the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins, they sent the Lions number 18 in exchange for the Lions moving down 2 spots, allowing the Lions to have their cake and eat it too by still getting their guy that they would have taken at number 3 anyways. Ohio State cornerback Jeffrey Okudah is the clear-cut number 1 cornerback and would give this Lions defense someone to rival the level of play from Darius Slay, whether he's back in 2020 or not. It's interesting though, it seems like the same Lions fans saying that the coaching staff is in win now mode, but yet talking about shipping out Darius Slay in the same offseason, which doesn't make sense, but this poor Lions fan base is just not very familiar with the moves that a smart front office makes. I want to take a break real quick and thank Manscaped for sponsoring my 2020 mock drafts this year. Manscaped is the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I'm a huge fan of Manscaped and their Perfect Package Essentials Kit, which is the world's first all-in-one manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy. I've told you about the Lawnmower 2.0 in previous mock drafts. They sent me one to try out, and it's awesome for keeping the hedges trimmed, but they've just released version 3.0, and this one takes it to the next level. It's got that same skin-safe technology with an even stronger motor and a battery that lasts even longer. This one's even got a built-in LED light that illuminates grooming areas for closer, more precise trimming. My subscribers get 20% off and free shipping, plus 2 free gifts when they purchase the new Perfect Package 3.0 kit with my code NFL20, that's NFL20 at manscaped.com. Thank you so much to Manscaped for sponsoring this mock draft. At number 6, the Los Angeles Chargers are on the clock. This marks only the 3rd time since 2004 that the Chargers have picked in the top 10. The other 2 picks had a defensive end Joey Bosa at number 3 overall and wide receiver Mike Williams at number 7. They need to land another franchise building block here because it could shape the direction of the franchise for a decade, or they could be back in the top 10 once again next year. Now, until he re-signs with the Patriots, Tom Brady Chargers rumors are going to fester. Seeing Tom Brady in a Chargers uniform would absolutely blow my mind, and while the traditionalist part of me would rather see Brady only ever wear a Patriots uniform, I am intrigued by seeing him surrounded by the surplus of offensive talent on this Chargers roster with a defense to complement it. If Brady plays with the Chargers, this pick needs to be offensive line because that's been the Chargers' Achilles heel with Phillip Rivers under center. Assuming that the Tom Brady thing is just an offseason rumor, I love the idea of the Chargers selecting Justin Herbert at number 6 overall and keeping him on the West Coast. It just feels right. I think that I like Justin Herbert more than most though. He's no Trevor Lawrence, but he's like a poor man's Trevor Lawrence. The physical skills and body compositions are similar, but it's the processing and mental side of Herbert's game where he's really lacking. It sounds like Justin Herbert looked really great at Senior Bowl practices, which to me is going to solidify him as a top 10 pick, whether it be by a team already slotted here in the top 10 or a team trading up. But the Chargers need to make the most of this pick, and whether or not they want to go with Tyrod Taylor for a year at quarterback or not, selling interest in Justin Herbert is the way to go so they can hold the key to him for a possible trade. With pick number 7, the Carolina Panthers are now on the clock, and with their past 3 top 10 picks, they have selected Christian McCaffrey, Luke Kuechly, and Cam Newton. That's probably 3 of the most popular players on the team, or was the top 3, and now a plan needs to be constructed for life after 2 of these guys this offseason. I'm all about getting yourself a top quarterback when you're picking this high in the draft. Otherwise, you might just find yourself picking this high once again, but new offensive coordinator Joe Brady saw firsthand how Clemson linebacker Isaiah Simmons can wreck an offensive game plan from his performance in the national championship. The Panthers defense has gotten identity crisis in their hands right now, but Simmons could allow the defense to play chess instead of checkers because he is a bona fide queen piece, lining up all over the defense, making an impact from linebacker, defensive end, safety, corner. Not often does a linebacker deserve to go in the top 10, but Isaiah Simmons is definitely that guy because an offense is going to need to know where he is at on the field before the snap every single play. Now the Panthers, they could be the team that throws all caution to the wind and screws up every mock draft out there if they choose to be aggressive and get a quarterback in the first round. Like I said, with them picking at number 7, it might not ever be easier to move up than it is right now. At least that's what you would hope for when you're trading up for a franchise quarterback. Pick number 8, the Arizona Cardinals are on the clock. Whether it's wide receiver or offensive line, help for their 2019 number 1 overall pick, Kyler Murray, probably will be the priority for the Cardinals in the first round. I think I've had them going wide receiver in most of my mock drafts thus far, but the Cards are in their favor to get one of the big 3 at offensive line this year, especially Alabama offensive lineman Jedrick Wills. If he's on the board, then I think that they need to prioritize help up front over a skill position, even if the top 2 wide receivers just fall into their lap. After the offensive line big 3 in this draft, the drop-off is kind of significant, and the cupboard is pretty bare for the Cardinals there. While they still have Larry Legend coming back for yet another season and a ton of young wide receiver prospects that could continue to develop and hopefully take another step forward in 2020. At number 9, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock, and this pick will be their 18th in the top 10 since the franchise came to existence in 1995, which is the most of any team during that time. I've had the Jaguars sticking with Isaiah Simmons for the past 2 drafts, and with him no longer on the board here, I'm switching it up for the Jaguars since we don't really have any clues regarding the direction that they could be heading just yet. However, we do know that they are kind of stuck at the quarterback position because of the salary cap and Nick Foles' contract handicapping them. So they've got to get Gardner Minshew set up for success, or Foles. One of these 2 has got to rise to the top, right? Offensive line is a good place to start, but this is a deep class, and I don't actually think that their offensive line is that bad, and it's interior offensive line that they need the most help at. So it's at least not requiring that they spend a top 10 pick on it. Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb are always going to have their careers compared to one another, and in the right systems, both of these guys could be number 1 wide receivers. Which receiver is viewed as the superior prospect will be one of the great pre-draft debates. I think that CeeDee Lamb might complement DJ Chark the best, but to me, Jerry Jeudy is the superior, or at least the safer of the prospects between these top 2. I love the idea of just surrounding these quarterbacks with talent, but I'm afraid that it might end up being the coaching that needs the most upgrade. At number 10, the Cleveland Browns are on the clock, and they must protect Baker Mayfield better than they did in 2019. They haven't taken an offensive tackle in the first round since selecting Joe Thomas 3rd overall in 2007. There's a high possibility that one of the big 3 offensive linemen won't be there at 10. Luckily in this scenario, Iowa offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs is still on the board. If new head coach Kevin Stefanski has one guy in mind, and if Andrew Berry, their new GM, signs off on it analytically, then the Browns, they could move up for him and make sure that they stay in front of the Jets. But looking back at the Vikings offensive line and the type of guys that they drafted and signed in free agency, I'm not sure if Tristan Wirfs actually fits that mold, and teams aren't breaking down any doors trying to trade up for offensive linemen these days. To me, a trade down makes the most sense and will be a likely route in my next mock draft for the Browns. At pick number 11, we have the New York Jets. They haven't spent a first-round pick on an offensive player who wasn't a quarterback since selecting tight end Dustin Keller at number 30 overall in 2008. They also have not spent a first-round pick on an offensive tackle since three-time Pro Bowler DeBrickashaw Ferguson in 2006. This might be a good year to reverse some of those trends, but with quite a few offensive tackle-needy teams in front of them, they might find themselves scrambling if they don't address the offensive line prior to the draft. In this scenario, I still have them going offense, but if you can't get offensive line help, get a wide receiver that takes some pressure off of the offensive line by simultaneously helping Sam Darnold get the ball out of his hand quicker with a guy like CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb excels when you get him the ball quickly in space and just let him make magic happen after the catch. At number 12, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders don't have a second round pick this year, but they have 2 first rounders and 3 third rounders. They re-signed cornerback Nevin Lawson, which doesn't mean that they still couldn't use one of these first rounders on a corner, but it frees them up to take the best player available. I actually don't see Derrick Brown lasting this long, but this seems like a solid floor for him if the run on offensive tackles pushes the defensive tackles down the board a little bit. At number 13, the Colts are on the board, and this is another prime spot for one of the talented wide receivers in this draft class. The Colts wideouts struggled mightily to stay healthy in 2019, so I don't feel like Jacoby Brissett got a fair shot in his first full year of starting at quarterback. However, Frank Reich is a big believer of drafting within the trenches, and I think that a run of defensive linemen is going to start in the early teens. Javon Kinlaw is the perfect defensive tackle for the Colts 4-3, and they don't really have a real defensive tackle on the roster. Their defensive line is made up of converted defensive ends, and that is a liability for them in the running game, which also puts a lot more pressure on their linebackers, but don't rule out a quarterback for the Colts. To me, this is the Jordan Love ceiling right now. I'm a big fan of the tools that he brings to the table, and this would be a great place for him with Jacoby Brissett there and under contract for a couple more seasons. It wouldn't force Love into a starting role too soon, and from the coaching to the offensive line, this is about as good of an offensive situation for a young quarterback to fall in as there is out there. From Luck to Love, it seems appropriate. But for the Colts right now, Javon Kinlaw is a solid placeholder until we have a little bit more of a clear understanding where these teams might go in the draft. At number 14, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this isn't considered a deep draft for offensive linemen, which is the Bucs' primary need. This 14th pick could instead provide help for one of the NFL's most improved defenses, and they don't want to see a production drop similar to the one the Rams did if and when Ndamukong Suh leaves. So they need to have the necessary prospects in place to replace him along the interior of the defensive line. AJ Epinesa is a classic tweener, and that's the only reason that he falls this far. The Buccaneers probably would have preferred to have one of the defensive tackles or an offensive line fall to them here, but Epinesa is a good consolation prize to help free up Shaq Barrett and these other edge rushers. At number 15, the Denver Broncos have unearthed some solid offensive prospects in the past 2 drafts, such as wide receiver Cortland Sutton, running back Royce Freeman, tight end Noah Fant, offensive tackle Dalton Reisner. They could opt for another playmaker or look for a replacement at cornerback for Chris Harris Jr., who is a free agent in 2020. The cornerback depth basically untouched so far in this draft, so the Broncos could have their pick of the realistic options that will be there at 15. But they will probably lose Justin Simmons in free agency, and Grant Delpit would be a steal for them at this point. People were confused in my last mock when I said that Delpit had somewhat of a down year in 2019, yet won the award for best defensive back in college football. I think that he was given that award as somewhat of a lifetime achievement award because he was so good in 2018, but I do expect more of that sophomore version of him in the pros and think he may have been holding back a little bit this past season due to those nagging injuries that he had. At pick number 16, the Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock. The Falcons have used their past 3 first-round picks, including 2 in last April's draft, on offense. They had one of the NFL's worst defenses in 2019, so they could address cornerback or the defensive line here. Yetur Gross-Matos fits the raw athletic mode that Dan Quinn has been trying to find, and with Vic Beasley basically out the door, they're going to need another guy to pair with Takk McKinley on passing downs. I've actually really liked the pairing of AJ Epinesa here, and could actually be a solid base defensive fit in this 4-3 scheme opposite of McKinley. So if he falls to them, I'd love to see that marriage happen, but I don't see it happening at 16. However, the Falcons are notoriously aggressive when there's a guy that they want, and after the last few years with this front office and coaching staff on their last legs, I expect them to trade up aggressively this year. At pick number 17, we have the Dallas Cowboys. The contracts of the Cowboys' entire cornerback depth chart expires within the next calendar season, or 14 months or so that's going to be a popular mock draft pick for them here. I love Christian Fulton and would welcome him here, but Morris Claiborne probably still leaves a bad taste in Jerry Jones's mouth. Mike Nolan is the Cowboys' new defensive coordinator, and he's got a 3-4 background, but it looks like they might still be running mostly 4-3 in his first season with the team. And while I bring up the cornerbacks, the pass rush is an underrated need for them. Robert Quinn was so good for the Cowboys in 2019, 2019, but 3-4 defenses seem to haunt this poor guy throughout his career. He's been pushed out of 3 teams by now by a new scheme and will probably go on his 4th team in 2020. With Quinn leaving a hole across from DeMarcus Lawrence, I really like another LSU defender here to plug in. Clavon Chason is a much smaller edge rusher than DeMarcus Lawrence and would help ease the 3-4 transition for them down the road while offering more ability to disguise coverage with his ability to play in space. The coaching staff is looking to get some of their guys, and the leadership from Chason would be a good building block for them as they install their own culture here. And at pick number 18, remember this one was traded from the Dolphins to the Lions to move up for Tua Tagovailoa. And I have the Lions selecting Oklahoma linebacker Kenneth Murray here. With this pick, the Lions can take a luxury pick on Kenneth Murray, who probably wouldn't have fallen to the Lions in the 2nd round. But as a bonus, they can feel comfortable using it on a position that has plagued this team for a long time. At pick number 19, the Las Vegas Raiders are back on the clock, and I'm probably basing my expectations for the moves that the Raiders will make too much on Gruden and his time in Tampa Bay. And what I'm getting at by that is that his patience with quarterbacks and production wears thin. So the fact that he's made it as long with Derek Carr and not had the production that he is probably expecting to this point means that there could be a new quarterback playing for the Raiders this year. And that new quarterback is going to need some more weapons to throw to. Henry Ruggs has the game-breaking speed of a Joey Galloway and would give them another dimension to add to their offense. John Gruden's going to stake everything on the next quarterback that he starts for the Raiders as they begin their journey in the Vegas desert. And I know that I've said I expect the Bucs to re-sign him, and maybe Bruce Arians was trying to play a little bit of contractual hardball with Jameis with his comments about winning with any quarterback if we can win with this guy. But if the Bucs don't bring him back, I'm actually thinking that Jameis Winston is a possibility for the Raiders. At pick number 20, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They acquired this pick from the Rams in the Jalen Ramsey trade, and it's entirely possible that they could turn around and use it on a cornerback again. Linebacker also seems like a strong possibility, especially if they follow the scenario here and make the luxury pick of Jerry Jeudy at number 9. But grabbing Christian Fulton at 20 would give them the best wide receiver and the 2nd or 3rd best cornerback in the draft. That's about as ideal of a scenario for them as I can imagine, and just picture how epic the one-on-one training camp battles between these two would be. With pick number 21, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock, and it's a good thing for the Eagles that there is a deep and talented receiver class this year. They didn't have a wideout reach 500 receiving yards for the first time since 1966. Carson Wentz needs some healthy wide receivers, and preferably ones that aren't challenging him as a leader, like Alshon Jeffrey. Did you notice how much Wentz improved once Alshon was out for the season? Their whole season flipped around. Colorado wide receiver Laviska Shenault is a quarterback-friendly weapon as a big slot wide receiver that excels in getting yards after the catch. This will allow Wentz to get the ball out quickly, which means the fewer hits he's going to take, and the more likely that he stays healthy long enough to play an entire playoff game. The Bills are at pick number 22, and the past 3 times the Bills took a wide receiver in the first round, that guy delivered at least one 1,000-yard season. Trivia time, can you name them all? Alright, so Sammy Watkins, that's an easy one. Lee Evans, I really liked him, and that poor guy fell off completely from injuries, despite being able to produce through poor quarterback play, but sadly is probably most well known for that playoff drop in New England that would have sent the Ravens to the Super Bowl, and then Billy Cundiff missed the field goal right after that. And then the third guy is Eric Moulds. He's the one that you probably would have had to Google because that goes all the way back to 1996. Anyways, the Bills got a free agency steal in John Brown, and Cole Beasley, he's going to be a solid slot for a couple more years, but they need an alpha, a number 1 wide receiver, and they might really want to trade up to get in front of the Eagles if there's one guy in particular that they fall in love with. To me though, the alpha that best fits what they need right now is T. Higgins. T. Higgins is that dude, and Josh Allen needs more wide receivers like him with this big catch radius that he can just launch the ball up to. I don't know what happened to Robert Foster, but pretty much at this point, anything that you get from him moving forward is just icing on the cake. But yeah, baby AJ Green, T. Higgins, this is a match that just seems to keep happening each time I do a mock draft. At pick number 23, we have the New England Patriots. Who knows what's going to happen with Tom Brady? I assume that he's going to come back for one more season, but I'm sure one of his stipulations is that he needs the front office to make more of an effort to improve this offensive line, especially now that their legendary offensive line coach has retired. The O-line really struggled last season. They don't have a 2nd round pick, but could have as many as 3 3rd round picks with compensatory picks. I think that Louisville offensive tackle Mekhi Becton has got that Marcus Cannon size and hopefully works out better as an offensive tackle than Cannon did, but they just don't make guys this big, so when they come around, you got to jump on them. Mekhi Becton has already been a really fast riser, I think, through this process, and could actually see himself climb all the way up into the top 20 when it's all said and done. At pick number 24, we have the New Orleans Saints. The Saints also don't have a 2nd round pick, so this will be of the utmost importance for them to nail. After Michael Thomas, the Saints receiving depth chart is barren. Justin Jefferson from LSU was a fringe 1st round pick a month ago, but after the playoff performances that we saw from both of these Louisiana teams, really, it's pretty clear that they both need each other. At pick number 25, we have the Minnesota Vikings. They need to figure out what they're going to do with cornerback Xavier Rhodes. Can they continue to pay him as much as he's getting, hoping that he just bounces back, or is he just washed at this point? They've also got free agency looming for Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, and they just like drafting cornerbacks. They've taken 4 in the first or second round since 2013. And I'm a sucker for cool draft stories, and putting Trayvon Diggs with his older brother Stephon Diggs would be a great way for them to ensure that big bro is getting the most out of little bro. Diggs worked his way up from a 5th round pick, and I'm sure that he would make sure his brother had as humbling of a start to his career despite being a 1st round pick. Trayvon Diggs is bigger than his older brother and might not have the same athleticism or speed. The NFL Combine is going to be a big factor in whether or not Trayvon Diggs is in fact a 1st round pick. At number 26, we've got the Miami Dolphins back on the clock. They had to move up to secure their franchise quarterback, so now they need to protect that investment right up the middle of their offensive line. Tyler Biadasz from Wisconsin is the best center in the draft, and the Dolphins have a better chance at filling in their offensive line with free agent offensive tackles and guards. Teams don't typically let the blue chip centers walk in free agency. At pick number 27, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Now, free agency is expected to hit hard in the trenches in Seattle, and they used the number 29 pick last year on defensive end LJ Collier, but he didn't even have a sack as a rookie. Now, I don't think that you can give up on him just yet, and there's a chance that they bring in some of these guys whose deals are expiring. I don't know if they'll be able to afford Jadeveon Clowney, or if having him in the building after a year, they really want to pay him long term. They could go offensive line here, but I'm looking at the other side of the ball because cornerback Trey Flowers didn't have the breakout season that I projected and could be moved back to safety if his struggles continue. CJ Henderson out of Florida has that same length that they love and is a much more reliable tackler, which is important because I'm pretty sure Devontae Adams is still running wild on their secondary. At number 28, we have the Baltimore Ravens. If you are basing everything about their offseason needs on the Ravens playoff game, then they need wide receivers more than anything, right? But you can't expect a rookie wide receiver to lead you to the promised land. We literally just watched that movie play out with them. The Ravens need Hollywood Brown to progress in year 2 and add some more reliable targets in free agency. I honestly think that if the Bengals franchise tag AJ Green, it's only so that he won't go to a team like the Ravens and make them pay for holding him hostage for a decade. But no, I'm looking at defense for the Ravens. They didn't get much of a pass rush in 2019, ranking in the bottom half of the league, and they haven't drafted an edge rusher in the 1st round since Terrell Suggs in 2003. And I think it's the pass rush that's really going to get this defense over the hump. Alabama edge rusher Terrell Lewis fits their 3-4 scheme, is a little bit raw, but that's kind of a common theme for the top pass rushers in this draft, not named Chase Young. And he also keeps that Ozzie Newsome legacy alive, but he is a traits guy, and I actually think that there's going to be quite a few busts among these edge rushers because everyone here is getting picked based off of traits over production. And when you're coming from an Alabama defense that's loaded with talent, I think sometimes it's easy to get lifted up a little bit by those around you. So we'll see if Terrell Lewis, or if he's actually got all the tools to bring it all together and be an effective pass rusher at the next level. At number 29, we have the Tennessee Titans. With star running back Derrick Henry due to hit free agency, the Titans could look to fill that running back hole here. It is a perfect spot to draft a running back because you get that 5th-year option, but man, it's going to be demoralizing if the Titans finally get good and they let King Henry pick up and roll out like that after getting a taste of the AFC Championship. I hate paying running backs a second contract, and to me, it's really no shocker that Derrick Henry really just turned it on for this contract year. I've been a really big fan of Derrick Henry's since coming out, but who really knows if you'll ever get a season out of him like this again. But you can't expect or predict players to get complacent. That relies on coaching. I think that Mike Vrabel will be able to keep him at a pretty productive level. Maybe never as good as this season that we just saw, but still a really effective running back. So assuming that they bring him back, let's have the Titans continue to build on their strength, which is the defense. Pairing last year's breakout edge rusher Harold Landry with Notre Dame's edge rusher Julian Okwara would give the Titans a vicious pass rush that can continue to get after the dynamic quarterbacks in the AFC. At pick number 30, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock, and they haven't taken a skill position player in the 1st round since drafting Aaron Rodgers in 2005. That's really an indicator of just how good of a quarterback that he's been over his career. Peyton Manning is one of everyone's favorite quarterbacks of all time, right? But man, the Colts surrounded him with weapons. I swear, they took a 1st round skill position player every single year and then spent the rest of their picks all on defense. And that was a really effective method. So the fact that the Packers have never given Aaron Rodgers any 1st round skill position players is pretty wild. But if they're going to squeeze out 3 to 5 more years out of him, they're going to need to reverse this trend, and that's if they don't spend some money in free agency to get him another weapon. TCU wide receiver Jalen Reagor would be a nice complement to Devontae Adams as a vertical threat, and really a deep threat is all that this offense seems to be missing at this point to really bring everything together for them. Thank you guys so much for watching so far through this draft. I want to take a quick break and throw out a few shameless plugs here. But first, I've got to give a shout out to the Premier Squad. You guys were so reliable and awesome every single week that I was able to schedule my weekly videos for Premier. We have a lot of fun in those chats. I'm involved probably 90% of the time. I'll be in there answering questions, clarifying things that I'm saying. We basically all get to watch the video together. To see those or be a part of those chats, you've got to have your notifications turned on, so make sure that you go through on your phone, have YouTube notifications set to on, and that way when I set a premiere, you'll be able to be a part of it. I'll probably try and schedule some of these premieres ahead of time in the future because the time crunch in the off season is not as tight as the weekly window that they are for the pick'ems. So I'll be able to give you a little bit of a heads up and hopefully be able to do them on like a regularly scheduled time, like every other Monday or something like that. And then I also want to promote my Discord channel. I'm really sorry for the guys in there right now. I was not able to participate in all of the discussions and stuff like that throughout the course of the season. I still read and monitor a lot of the things that people are talking about in there, but it's hard when I'm doing a weekly video and I don't want to share all of my opinions in a Discord chat and then forget to share them in a video. So it's a little bit different in the off season when you're debating players, signings, stuff like that. So I'd also like to shout out the Discord channel. I will be jumping back in there in the off season, so make sure that you're a part of that. I'd also like to announce that I have officially launched the NFL Retweet podcast. I'll basically be taking these videos, converting them into a more podcast form, and sharing them on all the top podcasting sites. So if you'd like to listen there, that is now an option also. But even if you don't like to listen there and another way to support the channel, go there and subscribe. That would be awesome. But yeah, enough of that stuff. Let's jump back into the final few picks of this mock draft. And here we go. Pick number 31, the San Francisco 49ers are on the clock. Don't get mad at me, 49ers fans. I'm just staying consistent here. This mock is taking place before the actual Super Bowl. So if I'm wrong on these final two picks, sue me. But the 49ers, they could be looking at another cornerback because Ahkello Witherspoon was a liability for them down the stretch. But this draft is pretty deep and they could start the wave of second-tier offensive tackles here in a move that would be mostly for the future. Just down the road, USC offensive tackle Austin Jackson is a guy that has left tackle potential, but could have the ability to kick inside for them if Joe Staley comes back. In my next mock with more trades, I'll probably have the 49ers trading this pick because it's such a prime spot for teams to jump back into the first round to secure that fifth-year option, and the trade capital the teams give up for the contract capital is always a win for the team trading back. And then finally, at pick number 32, the Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock. I mentioned earlier how I think that Isaiah Simmons was like a queen chess piece, right? You could move him all over the place. The Chiefs defense could really use a linebacker with that kind of speed and athleticism. Well, guess what? There's a surprise linebacker entry to this draft, and his name is actually Queen. Patrick Queen from LSU. He might not be in the same class as Isaiah Simmons, but he'd add a much needed dimension to the Chiefs defense. I didn't anticipate him in this draft, but with half of the LSU Tigers team jumping ship, it made sense for him, especially considering how weak this linebacking class is. With an impressive combine, I could see him being a fast riser up draft boards and could even overtake Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. That's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. My second mock of 2020 will come out in a couple of weeks and it will have 2 rounds with trades. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel to get notified when the mock draft hits. Bear with me as we venture into this seemingly endless NFL offseason period, but I think that if we do it together, we can make it so that it doesn't feel quite as long. Remember, you can always contact me on Twitter. You can hit me up in Discord and join in there, and we're going to be doing a lot of different discussions. I might have like a weekly segment in there on the Discord channel so that people know that, hey, on Mondays, you can show up and post your mock draft and a bunch of people will jump in and we'll all discuss mock drafts on Mondays or something like that. Just something to get us through and ease out of the football season rather than dropping it cold turkey. But yeah, thanks again, and I will see you all in the next video.